Hello everyone, my name is Cullen Joyce. I'd like to welcome you to this guided meditation session presented by the Contemplative Studies Centre at the University of Melbourne. I'd like to start with the Acknowledgement of Country. I respectfully acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional owners of the land on which many of us are residing. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So we at the Centre are delighted to welcome the Venerable Thubten Chokyi, who will be facilitating the Tibetan meditation series over the next few weeks. Venerable Chokyi is resident teacher at Haragriva Meditation Centre and Tara Meditation Centre in WA and has been meditating since the early 80s. She's the director of the Liberation Prison Project, which supports men and women in prisons worldwide to transform their minds and lives. And she is spiritual advisor to Sakyadhita, Australia, representing women in Buddhism, and current chair of the Australian Sangha Association. In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, meditation is about more than just improved health. Developing the ability to calm and control the mind helps the Buddhist meditator to lead a simpler life and progress toward being a kinder and happier person. This meditation series invites you to take time to slow down and sit in meditation to soothe the body and mind into a state of balance, comfort and ease, nourishing moments of mental calm. So if you have any questions during the session, please place them in the Q&A and Chokyi will address as many of these as possible toward the end. So welcome, Venerable Chokyi. Good to see you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to join you and to join everyone for this session and indeed for the next weeks of these sessions. So just a little bit today by way of introduction. First of all, to myself, of course, thank you, Cullen, for that wonderful introduction. But in terms of, I guess, my spiritual journey, just a little bit, I grew up as a Catholic and from an early age was very interested in contemplative traditions with very little exposure to that. But by the time I was in my 20s, I really started looking around more to Eastern traditions, which seemed to have more discourse around meditation and so forth. And so, and then I, sort of explored different modalities, maybe we all do. And it wasn't until I really established, I guess, myself in Tibetan Buddhism in terms of realizing this was my home, my spiritual home, that I started meditating with, well, I'd already been meditating, but with more regularity. And what I found was the thing that most resonated with me was the best method I could find for anxiety. And what's more, entirely free. So that was really quite part of an attraction to me. And as I went on in my professional career, I was working at the University of New South Wales in Nurragili, which is an Aboriginal centre there, Centre for Indigenous Studies. And there I encountered the work of Miriam Ungdamir Bauman and others in terms of Didiri, deep listening. I'd already been interested in that space. And so for me, now that's become part of my ongoing engagement, that I'm very much like, I follow very much the tradition of the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama encourages like interfaith dialogue, interreligious dialogue, but not just that, people of all spiritualities and so forth, and how much we can learn from each other. And for me, being Australian, living in Australia, it makes sense to sit on the land, be part of the land. And this is, within the Indigenous culture is very much part of that sense of reciprocity and interdependence and so forth. So I really draw a lot from that. And as I moved towards ordination, my spiritual director, my advisor, encouraged me to continue on that journey and said it's very important, it's very important for us, for humanity, that sense of, we've had a sense, very much over the last few years, but ongoing, this sense of separation, disconnect, and so forth. And that, you know, Indigenous cultures and other cultures can bring that sense of connection. And this is what I find through meditation practices as well. And so the Tibetan tradition has many, many different methods of meditation, but they basically come down to two categories. The first, as shared with all Buddhist traditions, of being able to make the mind serviceable in terms of developing single-pointed concentration, developing this notion of stillness of the mind, that we can develop the mind to exquisite levels of concentration. We talk about shamatha, calm abiding, shamatha in the Sanskrit, or shine in Tibetan, calm abiding, literally, to bring our mind to a state of calm, of peace. And that was part of my spiritual journey. I love the little books of calm. But then also being able to harness the energy of that mind to develop more and more exquisite levels of concentration, that certainly drawing from the Tibetan tradition of the fact that Tibet was isolated from the rest of the world for up until the 1950s, and preserved a lot of these traditions, and particularly great, meditators, yogis of the past. And of course, most of us just want a day-to-day practice. Thank you very much. Let's be practical, but that it is possible to develop exquisite levels of concentration such that, eventually you could focus your mind on whatever you want to without distraction for as long as you want. Of course, that does require, a lot of hard yards and long retreat. But even in our day-to-day practice, we can see that through bringing our mind to that state of serviceability, because that's why we harness that energy, instead of during the day, moment by moment, our energies are dispersing outwards to all the sensory inputs. We're not necessarily aware of that, but that, our mind is quite busy a lot of the time in ways that we don't necessarily want it to be busy. We want to harness the energy of the mind, but direct it where we want to. So that's that sort of bringing it, first of all, to that state of stillness, that state of calm, that state of mental quiescence. And then the other main body of meditation is using the capacity of the mind to think. We don't want to stop the mind thinking. It's the job of the mind. But to be able to draw on that and again direct that on the basis of a mind of concentration to investigate whatever topic we wish to analyze and so forth. So using our intelligence, our human intelligence, to really delve deeply into different topics of investigation. So a typical one is, say, looking at, as the Buddha's first teaching, on impermanence, that everything is subject to change. And we address that through investigating the mind. We go into our mental lab, if you like, and investigate the moment by moment change of the mind. Moment by moment change means moment by moment opportunity for transformation, for directing our mind to focus on what we want it to focus on, and whatever analysis that we use on that basis. So there, within the Buddhist tradition, and certainly within the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, there are certain topics and certain we use logical reasoning to investigate. So that's one aspect. And then another aspect is using visualization. We use very much, probably the Tibetan traditions know more than any other tradition, visualization. Many years ago, I trained as a Feldenkrais practitioner as well, and really getting a sense of being fully embodied and my image of my body and my, bringing it together with the actuality and so forth. And that's used a lot now in sports training, AIS and so forth, that we can visualize perfectly what we want to do without being able to exhaust our body if you're a pro athlete in the process. So using these qualities of visualization to enhance and uplift our mind. And that brings me to the other main body of work in the Tibetan genre of meditation, which we call Lojong, mind training. You could say it's all mind training, but here we're actually harnessing the positive energies of our mind that are innate to us. And here, hearing that all our loving kindness, all our compassion is innate to us. That Charles Darwin said, we're hardwired for compassion. We can't help but help. And so we cultivate those, first of all, towards ourselves, to instead of our mind yanking us around with all these disturbing thoughts and destructive emotions, to be able to deliberately to enhance more and more our innate qualities of loving kindness, compassion, a mind of equanimity, of evenness, of balance, a mind of equal regard, for others, and a mind of joy. I've been inspired. I've watched a few times this year already. Miss and Joy, between dialogues between His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. And to harness that energy to uplift our mind, because we need a powerful mind to deal with this crazy world, to say the least. So another, in terms of modern developments in the whole sort of Tibetan discourse, has been the conferences between His Holiness the Dalai Lama, instigating that in the mid-80s, with neuroscientists, with physicists, with psychologists, with all sorts of, with the whole field of mind science, and seeing in collaboration through the Mind and Life Institute what we can learn from each other, what we can share with each other. And this has been very exciting development for myself within my organization, that we're rolling out programs on the science of mind and so forth, and drawing on that, and drawing on the, those great, I'm very much influenced from that very first conference, which was on destructive emotions, very much influenced by the work coming out of that of Paul Ekman as a psychologist and Alan Wallace coming from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, in developing this program, which I had the fortune to train in, the Cultivating Emotional Balance, which actually says that beyond, the realms of psychology, modern psychology and so forth, there's exquisite levels of emotional well-being we can develop, really beyond our imagining, and that this has been proved by past great meditators and so forth. And we know for ourselves that perhaps the attraction to meditate is that enhanced sense of well-being. And that really also brings me back to, having worked with Indigenous communities and talking about the interdependence and the interconnectedness between a community's health, an individual's health and well-being, the flourishing of the country, the culture and so forth, and that really sort of holistic approach to emotional well-being. So this is something we'll explore over the coming weeks. And then on top of that, this exquisite attentional balance. So this is all part of this Cultivating Emotional Balance program. Attentional balance, as I said, that we can have single-pointed concentration meditation. That, why is it not introduced into schools? It would make every teacher's job so much easier. It makes us more effective in whatever we do. And also cognitive balance, which comes out of the analytical process of using our human intellect to investigate. This is what we do, researchers of the mind, based on our own first-person experience and being guided through that. And also a sense of purpose and meaning, a sense of altruism that gives us purpose, having that balance. So balancing all of these minds, overcoming the sort of ADHD mind, and all the distractions outwards. One of the main commentators on this in the Tibetan tradition, Lama Tsongkhapa in the 14th century, said for the discursive mind, our chatterbox mind, if you like. And he was talking the 14th century in Tibet, where, he's on a mountaintop and on the rooftop of the world and vast skies and so forth, and not all the technology that we have today. And saying on that basis, the best thing that we can focus on is the breath. Now, this is common in all traditions, so I just thought we'd introduce, a brief meditation on that today, connecting the sense that why the breath? Well, it's an easy thing for us to focus on. It's something physiological, but it's intimately connected to our emotional state. So even without telling the mind to calm, and as I said, I did indeed follow those meditations, calm the mind, but without that, over time, we see that our mind does settle. It naturally settles because its natural state is one of stillness. And it's probably that stillness we crave. We also, we want a peace of mind. Indeed, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, says if every schoolchild learnt to meditate, within one generation, we'd have peace in the world. It seems inconceivable, doesn't it? Particularly in the current situation that we're facing in the world today, where we're seeing absolutely the opposite because of this disconnect. And so that if our mind is in peace, if our mind is calm and based on our innate positive qualities, it cannot do harm to ourselves, to others. And we start with ourselves, so it's intimately connected with our emotional state. When we get a fright, we hold our breath and things like that. But also, over time, by focusing on the breath and developing more and more a regular practice on the breath, then the mind starts to settle more and more. And because the mind settles, the breath settles, it's interrelated. And you have to pay more attention so that you can develop more and more subtle levels of focus, concentration. So it's sort of the mechanics of how it works. And of course, also we can only breathe in the present moment. They say, be here now. How do we do that? Well, we focus on the breath. So I'll guide us through a brief meditation on that, starting with setting our body in a conducive posture. And then also, I like to emphasize, and I guess it's part of the Tibetan tradition to very much emphasize the relationship of the inner elements of our body with the external elements. And, very much coming from that Tibetan tradition where the sense of all the mental disturbances comes from an imbalance of, this is in Tibetan medicine, an imbalance of the elements internally, externally. So I invite you then, as we segue into a brief meditation, to settle your body into a conducive posture. In other words, that you feel very stable, well supported. So well supported, however, if you're sitting in a chair, through the soles of your feet, through your bottom on the chair, through whatever part of you is in contact with a horizontal surface, that you really feel the support coming up from the ground, feeling earthed, literally grounded to the earth below. And so here we can feel the solid bits of our body through our pelvis, through our legs, through our feet, the bones, the muscles, well supporting us, well connected, the earth element in our body with the earth element below, externally. And it's very important to have a sort of stable, safe, solid foundation for meditation, because often our mind's very flighty and, our sense of gravity seems to be somewhere up in the head direction. And so here we're bringing our center of gravity down, really feeling anchored to the earth. And then with the spine long and straight, one long line. If you're sitting, I automatically tilt my pelvis forward because that automatically brings the spine into one long line. So the crown of your head, if you're sitting facing towards the ceiling, and then your jaw just naturally relaxed and so forth. So you've got this central axis of the spine, and you're like a cantilever archway, if you like, you know, the legs supporting you, and then all the muscles can be soft, completely at ease, come to a state of rest. So this sense of groundedness, it said, you know, be strong like a mountain. We have this, use all these different analogies. Get that sense of inner strength, resilience, and a sense of balance. And inviting the mind to settle into this space. It's not the body that meditates, it is the mind. And here in meditation, whichever meditation we do, we're bringing our body and mind together in the one moment. I mean, most of the time the body's here and the mind's going over things from the past or planning ahead to the future. But here it's like a relief from that to just settle into the present moment, into the space of the body. And attuning your awareness just naturally to the rhythm of your breath, wherever you experience that in your body. So the first aspect of this is developing a quality of relaxation, of ease. It's not the whole goal, but first of all, a sense of spaciousness in the body, the space of each breath, particularly the breath out as you breathe out more and more. Release, relax, let go, any tension, any tightness, any disturbances in the body that's distracting you. Dissolve that into the breath out, so your body settling more and more into a state of comfort and ease. Savoring moment by moment the release, the relax with each moment of the breath out, all the way to the end, not jumping ahead, your mind staying present with each moment of the breath. And typically we hold tension around our face or around our head, where the senses are primarily focused, you know, our eyes, our ears, our nose, our tongue. So soften, really melt any tension there with the breath out, luxuriating in the unwinding, letting go with each moment of the breath out, coming to more and more comfort and ease, and also releasing any tension arising from the mind being distracted, caught up in thoughts. We're not trying to stop it, it's its job, but letting go the tension around that, dissolve that with the breath out. And then moment by moment, as the breath arises, the breath naturally comes in. We don't have to control the breath. It's not, breath's perfect. Your body's keeping you alive, done a great job so far. The breath in, moment by moment arising, we slightly tighten our focus, but keeping our mind relaxed, our body relaxed, spacious, but slightly tighten the focus on the moment by moment arising of the breath, to give a sense of alertness. So balancing this relaxation with a mind of alertness, of focus, finding our own balance. And with that mind in balance, settling on a smaller area of the body, on the abdomen, deep in that abdomen, that sense of stability, groundedness, support, safety. So focusing on the abdomen, we can think the gentle rise and fall of the abdomen with the breath in its natural rhythm, perfect as it is like the gentle rise and fall of, think a pristine mountain lake, completely pure. And just that natural, it's cool, it's refreshing, but that natural rise and fall, it's not that, the diaphragm is not a lake, but that quality of natural rhythm connecting our internal experience with the external experience of motility, of movement through the natural rise and fall of the breath. And see if you can enhance that continuity of attention all the way of the breath out, the next breath. Even between breaths, you might notice a stillness, savor that. And then the next breath arises, moment by moment, continuous attention, refreshing, bringing oxygen in, replenishing our body-mind continuum. And more focused attention, continue to release, relax with the breath out. And continuing to focus on the continuity of the breath, but refining your attention to the more subtle sensations of the breath in and out of the nostrils. We don't start here because we're going to squeeze the mind. Keep the mind spacious, open, the body relaxed. We've cultivated relaxation, stability. And place your awareness just below the nostrils, above the upper lip, where the passage of air in and out of the breath, the outside air cooler coming in, the warmer air of the breath as you exhale. And just keep your attention there. We're not following the breath in and out, but just to notice any flaring sensations, tickling sensations, the warmth or coolth, whatever we notice is fine. Maybe we notice that the breath is smooth, even throughout, or maybe more at the beginning, more at the middle, more at the end, whatever we notice. Again, checking up, we're not furrowing the brow to concentrate. It's not that. Relax, spacious, and yet, sort of finely attuned to the subtle sensations of the breath at the nostrils. This enhances the mind's natural clarity. And then release that attention to the breath and rest in the natural clarity, luminosity of the mind, the vast, infinite space, like the blue sky on a sunny day. You know, in Tibet, they talk about the sky coming down and completely enveloping you. So to get a sense of that clarity, spaciousness, potential of our mind, simply aware, without placing our awareness on anything in particular, resting in that experience for as long as you can. And hold that sense of spaciousness, clarity, stability, whatever element of calm, stillness that you have tapped into in these very, very brief time. Holding that as you bring your attention out from the space of the body, feeling contact with the chair or seat or the air on your skin, the space around you. So there's a continuity of those qualities as we continue to engage, as we go through the day ahead, the rest of the day ahead. And something that we can come back to time and time again throughout the day, pepper our moment with moments of mindfulness. So then in your own time, if you had your eyes closed, open your eyes, adjust the light and sights around you. So that's by way of just a very brief introduction of different modalities of focusing on the breath to enhance particular qualities of the mind.
Thank you very much, Chokyi, for that meditation. And thank you for the introduction to the, providing us with the context as well, and giving us a very pithy history of mindfulness research too, so I appreciate it. Look, we have a few comments and some questions, if that's all right.
Yes.
We have anonymous attendees asked, and this is something that you might have addressed also with some of the material you provided, but they ask, how often should I meditate per day to increase my concentration? And do you recommend any books for beginners? Thank you.
Yes, so thank you. I think that's a frequent question, you know, how it's good to have to start. It's good to have a routine, to set a daily practice. Our minds like routine. I always thought when I was young, I saw a routine coming and I went the other way. But actually, we want to have routine. And so it's good. It is said, you know, if it's possible to meditate in the one place, I certainly didn't start out like that for many years. I didn't, you know, I was traveling around and so forth. So, but if you have it in one place, it sort of builds up a familiarity. The Tibetan word for meditation is gom. And so familiarizing with the practice, familiarizing indeed with our mind as well, but familiarizing with the space in which we meditate. It doesn't have to be a dedicated space in your place, but just for that time, so that the body gets used to that, the mind gets used to that. And so there is a convention of around 25 minutes or 24 minutes actually. But when we think about that, like with this brief time that we did now, it's like the instructions coming along are interspersed at a few minutes, because the capacity for our mind to concentrate initially is not very long. So we want to balance quality over quantity and not have a fixed time. So if you say 5 minutes or 10 minutes, I remember one of my teachers saying, minimum 5 minutes every day, but by the time we see you in a year's time, you have to have done 300 hours. And I realized 5 minutes a day, I wasn't going to crack it, right? But even, setting ourselves an achievable goal. And if we think 5 minutes is too short, but make it 10 minutes, make it 20 minutes if you like. Best in the morning before if we're going to meditate just once in a day, best in the morning before we get involved with the day, because our mind is at its quietest. It might not be entirely quiet, but we haven't engaged in more busyness of the day. So it's easier to settle into that meditation zone. Of course, it does take time to settle into that, familiarity. And so whatever you set that time at the beginning. Like if you decide I'm doing 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever amount of time, then you set it right at the beginning and don't change that for that session. Keep it that amount of time. Even if it's going along swimmingly, don't think, oh, I'll just do another 10 and then, the mind gets distracted. It's good to, sort of stop while we're feeling uplifted or feeling confident in our practice. And if however many minutes you start with, if you find, oh, I'm really good at that now, just add 3 minutes on. That's the general advice. And so that, over time you can progress further. But, it's like when we go to the gym, it's sort of like however much we put into the workout, we see the results. But we want to really make it something we can do and something we're going to do on an ongoing basis, so that we want to make it achievable, not too hard for ourselves. We always have to, it's something that is so needed for mental health. We've got all these sort of, particularly post-COVID, lockdown, so forth, increasing mental health issues anyway in the world. So, we want to that.
Thank you, Chokyi. We've also put up some a URL with some of the resources that you provided for your sessions.
Yes.
So they're just we've listed those in the chat so people can access those as well. But if you'd like to add any extra to that, you can.
I would suggest as a good starting point, particularly for developing concentration meditation, is Alan Wallace's Attention Revolution, which is actually based on a 5-day. 7-day actually shamatha meditation program, calm abiding meditation program. I had the great fortune to be able to participate in those since 2005, since he first came to Australia, and so that's a good place to start. And also his website, alanwallace.org, has podcasts as well. So people like to also have podcasts so you can follow along the instruction. But that book in particular, generically, as this Cultivating Emotional Balance program, His Holiness was really interested in making it a secular program. You don't have to believe in any faith or whatever to meditate, just have a functioning mind. So that's what it's appealing to.
Fantastic. So we've put that up for people so you can access that through the chat. So I had a quick comment from another anonymous attendee. They were describing how they became quite emotional during the breathing exercise, and if you could comment a little bit on why that might be happening for them.
Yeah. So yes, that comes up a lot actually. It's said that if you're not, if things don't come up, you're not meditating properly. I'm not sure, but because what we're really doing is becoming familiar with as well the state of our mind. Sometimes people say, I never realized I had so many thoughts. Great, now you noticed. And depending on so when we're meditating on the breath, the object of meditation isn't an emotional state. So in that time of meditation, we don't want to go off and investigate the emotion, but should it hijack your meditation, you take a break and you you know, go for a walk, splash your face if you want to continue on in the meditation. But then it may be that depending on the, you know, intensity of that emotion, whether you also need other supports. You know, meditation's a support for our mind. It's not the answer to all mental health. And so different things will come up. People see images, they have physical sensations, thoughts, emotions arise. In fact, the Dalai Lama talked about, he wrote a book, Healing Anger. He talked about dealing with anger in his own mind. And he said, you know, that he watches, now he can watch anger arise, but not cognitively fuse with it. So he can observe it and fade away 1 minute. Okay, that's the Dalai Lama. He said, the reason I can do that is I've meditated since I was 6 years old. Now, we're not 6-year-old, but we can see that it brings us face to face what is in our mind. And we can, you know, the mind will eventually calm down. And there are other meditations like on loving kindness, which is a total antidote to, say, something like anger. So there are opposite states of mind that enhance our positive qualities that can help quell those emotional states, but slowly.
Thank you, Chokyi. Look, we're coming to the end of the time, but so what I've done is I've recorded the 3 other questions that were there. Some of them are kind of connected to the physical postures and things. So would you mind if I, just to say to the audience, I might record those and we can come back and I'll send them to you so that you can make a comment on them before the next session, if that's okay?
For sure. Happy to.
So,
yes.
But just because we're at time, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming and let me just and thank you for you, Chokyi, for your discussion and your meditation today, and thank the audience for joining us. And so we'll be offering these sessions for the next 4 to 5 weeks, I think, is that right? And so at the same time each week. So we're really looking forward to seeing you each week, and we hope that by the end of it we've gained a wonderful kind of sense of the tradition too. So I'm really grateful for that, Thubten Chokyi. So we'll see everybody.